welcome back to the Becoming a BS Artist series, where we are learning the fine art of using behavioral science tools to motivate action. 2 weeks ago, we covered feedback loops, and today's BS tool of choice is choice architecture. I'll start with a quote. This comes from behavioraleconomics.com. This term of choice architecture was coined by Thaler and Sunstein in 2008. It refers to the practice of influencing choice by organizing the context in which people make decisions. So what does it mean to organize the context in a way that influences choice? Let's start by taking a look around our homes. Have you ever done any of the following? Placed a full glass of water by your bed so you'll drink it first thing in the morning to achieve your hydration goals. Maybe you've stored sweets or indulgent food items in a difficult to see or difficult to reach place to avoid impulsive snacking. Maybe you've laid out exercise clothes in a visible location to prompt yourself to work out that day. Or placed your reusable bags near the door so they are in the car for your next shopping trip. If you have done any of these things or anything similar, you have altered your space in a way that reminds, prompts, supports, and encourages the habits you want to adopt. You choice architectured yourself. Nice work! So the following quote actually sets the stage for why choice architecture in the context of conservation and sustainability, and really any social good program, is needed. And this quote comes from a paper written by Eric Johnson and others. The quote is, "While it is tempting to think that choices can be presented in a neutral way, like just the facts, ma'am, the reality is that there is no neutral architecture. Any way a choice is presented will influence how the decision maker chooses." So every physical setting we enter, every decision-making junction we encounter has already been designed to influence us. In some places, the context is designed to create an orderly process, like the queue ropes at banks that ensure we are served on a first-come basis. Sometimes the context is designed in a way that does not ultimately benefit the user, like the candy section at the grocery store checkout aisles. And even though it's likely not done intentionally, poorly designed spaces and contexts leave us confused about what we should be doing or where we should be going. We have an opportunity to incorporate elements of choice architecture into our programs to help guide, prompt, support, and encourage audiences to make sustainable choices. So let's explore if choice architecture is a good fit for our projects. So it is a good fit if all of the following elements are present. 1, our audience will encounter one or more moments in their journey of change where they face various options about what they should do next, with some options being better than others. The interests of the audience are aligned with the desired behavior or choice, meaning we're not influencing a choice that would harm the decision maker. And, currently, most people want to lead more climate-friendly lifestyles, but are struggling due to information overload, a lack of guidance on the best actions to take, and low transparency about environmental impacts. So choice architecture can really help lower these barriers for our audience. And thirdly, you have some control over how options are presented to your audience by redesigning or adding cues to a physical space like a visitor center, reference materials like a restaurant menu, or a digital platform like a website or app. If you don't have any control over how options are presented to your audience, then choice architecture may not be the right tool for your program. But I encourage you to continue listening to see if there's maybe a non-obvious place in the audience journey where you can help them make better decisions. So let's add a splash of behavioral psychology to the mix. Organizing or reorganizing the decision-making context motivates action in the following ways. Similar to feedback loops, it reduces uncertainty about how to behave and which options to choose. I wrote a blog about 2 years ago about my first time eating at Panera Bread, which highlights how a lack of choice architecture and cues can prompt audiences to abandon their efforts altogether, mainly because they're just so uncertain about what they're supposed to do. And here's a quote related to uncertainty from the behavioral scientist website. People are often unsure about what option to choose, whether to consent to organ donation or not, how much to save for retirement. Those are difficult and important decisions, clouded by uncertainty. But this does not mean that people will always follow the easiest path. Instead, people may look for cues in the choice architecture that can help them come to a decision. So choice architecture also works because it prevents choice overload, which we can see maybe obviously why these two things are connected. Now, I wrote about the behavioral bias of choice overload last year, which describes how difficult it is to make a decision when too many options are presented to us simultaneously. Choice architecture takes the potential of information overload into consideration from the start, and then crafts a decision-making process that does not, ideally at any point, overwhelm the audience. Lastly, choice architecture works because it helps busy people make decisions. And guess what? We're all busy, all of us. Our busy, tired, rushed minds are not great at making decisions that are in our best interest or making decisions at all. Think about how hard it is to decide what to eat when you're exhausted at the end of the day. As a result, humans seek mental shortcuts and informational cues to make their decision-making process more manageable. So if you're feeling excited about getting started, here is what you'll need to architect and implement choice architecture. The 3 essential items are a decision-making setting, again, like a digital platform, a physical space, or reference materials that you have permission to redesign or alter. You'll need a detailed map or, what I like, a behavior journey of the audience's decision-making experience and where uncertainty, choice overload, or difficulties may occur in that process. And lastly, a set of desired choices you want the audience to make instead of whatever they're making now. So 3 things that sounds kind of easy and basic, but none of them are really very easy or basic to obtain. But now that you have those elements ready, let's get into how to implement choice architecture. It's kind of like molding clay, but just a hell of a lot harder. Sorry. So we'll start by modifying the options. We can modify the options by improving the ratio of good to bad options or reducing the number of less good options overall. This step helps to shift the status quo towards sustainability. So imagine if a grocery store checkout lines featured more grab-and-go fruit options than candy bars. It could result in more impulse banana purchases, and wouldn't that be great? So some other examples out in the wild of modifying options. Restaurants and dining establishments can increase the number of plant-based options on the menu, so there's a more even balance between plant-based and meat-based dishes. In a super ideal world, it would be, maybe even lopsided towards plant-based. Offices can increase the size of available recycling containers to be much larger than landfill containers to signal that recycling is the priority and the preference. Stores can change their default option to feature sustainable items, like you only get a reusable container instead of a disposable one, but maybe you have to ask to get a disposable one. Some places started to do this with plastic straws several years ago. I even worked with an organization that adjusted their trails so that people had to walk on a shoe cleansing mat in order to get to the next part of the trail. So rather than asking people to wipe their feet, they almost had no choice to. They had to cross through this kind of narrow walkway in which there was a mat directly under their feet, and magically, they started wiping their feet more. The second thing to do when designing choice architecture is to draw attention to the better options. You can use signage, guide markers, special displays, and colors to reduce that choice overload and chart the audience's path forward. Typically, when BS artists talk about nudges, they're most often referring to this kind of intervention. Placement is important for this step if you can control how a space is designed and arranged. For example, where the recycling bin is located within a room or a building can impact if it's used with frequency and accuracy. I recently attended a conference where choice architecture practices were featured prominently throughout the presentations. Yet the dining areas, composting, recycling, and landfill bins were scattered like randomly around the room. I found myself circling around to find a compost bin, which could have been highlighted and placed in more prominent locations using choice architecture. In the written version of this post, I feature a few more examples from places like Marketing for Change, some things that we did during the pandemic to help people stay 6 feet apart, and some other fun examples of how we can get people to use trash cans or cigarette disposal items. So do check out those examples in the written version as well. The third thing to do when implementing choice architecture is to also present the options in an appealing way. So we can design the options to showcase recommendations and highlight the benefits of better choices. For example, a restaurant can draw the audience's attention to its plant-based options, but still present them in an unappealing way that means it doesn't entice the audience to actually order one. So maybe I get to the plant-based part of the menu and it says healthy start breakfast. Well, that's okay. But instead they could do cozy cinnamon oatmeal with berries. Yum, I want that. It might actually be a healthy start breakfast, but the way the option was presented appeals to me much more. And this step is especially important if there are many options for the audience to choose from, even after you've whittled them all down from the earlier step. I can imagine this technique being used on a website to highlight which native wildflowers and plants are recommended for my region, with additional details on caretaking and environmental benefits to help guide my ultimate decision. During these moments of more intentional consideration, as opposed to those impulse decisions, providing additional information on impacts and benefits is helpful for the audience. Lastly, create some promotion and buzz around making better choices. Choice architecture certainly can exist solely within its intended domain, but I'm a big fan of adding more communication to motivate and reinforce the desired behavior. Consider creating a mini, or if you want to go for it, a big campaign that motivates the audience to try something new and different. If you need ideas for starting a promotional effort, I wrote a whole series earlier this year called Terms of Engagement, which you can check out. I also recorded that series as well. So those are the 4 main things to implement choice architecture for your programs, but I do need to end today with a caveat and a warning. Let's start with the caveat. Good choices and good habits are not always one and the same. While choice architecture techniques can successfully influence someone's actions at that moment, the same behavior is unlikely to carry over to other settings automatically. For example, a dining hall may be able to guide its customers to eat more sustainably through its choice architecture. But that doesn't guarantee that those same eaters will replicate their choices at home or in other dining establishments. This is one of the reasons why I recommend adding a communication campaign to the effort, as that can go a step further to motivate audience members to adopt the behaviors in other aspects of their lives. So now the warning. Choice architecture must be implemented ethically. Shaping how people make decisions and which decisions they make is powerful, and unfortunately, often used with malintent to benefit someone other than the decision maker. And I'm thinking of that checkout line candy stash that I always get suckered into. So it's critical to ensure our audiences always retain agency over their own decisions and are never coerced into doing something they don't want to do. In the written version of this, I provided a link to the behavioral scientist's ethics checklist, which is a helpful reference guide when designing and implementing choice architecture or really any other behavioral science tool for your projects. Well, that's it for choice architecture, how to shape choice architecture for your projects. You're now on your way to becoming a certified BS artist. Nice work. Stay tuned for 2 more posts on this topic coming to you. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.